Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1449. Hey, if you want to download this Excel file so you can follow along, click on the link below the video. Hey, we got to see how to create a DAX measure for percentage change, both for month over month and year over year when we have incomplete years in our data set. Now, here's our data set and control down arrow. So we have like 23,000 rows of sales. And from our data set, I've already created a standard pivot table in Excel because there are great show value as calculations for change and percentage change. But there's a problem if we don't have complete years. Now, these calculations work fine. For example, down here, the change, it's taking a full year minus a full year, and then it's calculating the percentage change. Up here, for the actual month comparison, and I did a formula off to the side, this calculation will say, hey, 2015 May minus 2014 May. That'll calculate correct, and so will the percentage change. So that's for the month. When you have an individual month, or down here a complete year-on-year comparison, it works. It's when we get to these partial years. So for example, down here, we cannot compare the entire 12 months for 2015 to the 8 months for 2014. That change is too big, and that percentage change is much too big. If inside our DAX formula, we could figure out what last year is, well, that will be easy, but it's this part. We need to compare only May to December. And we can actually do that in our DAX formula by looking at the previous year's sales and saying, are the sales for each month greater than 0? That way we can pick out the months May to December and then pull from 2015 May to December. Then from those two numbers, we can easily calculate the change and the percentage change. When we get down to our last year, well, that total is only for January to July. So I don't want to compare 7 months here to 12 months back there. So what we would really like for the percentage change is, yes, we want all the months from the current year, but please only pick out January and July from the previous year. And we'll do that in our formula by saying, hey, how many months in the current year have sales greater than 0? And then, of course, we can calculate our percentage change. All right, now I've already started by converting both of these to Excel tables in the design. That's called F sales. This one's called D date. Over in the data model, I've already added those two tables. If we look in diagram view, there's the F sales table. There's the date table. There's a one-to-many relationship. Back in data view, we have our two tables, F sales and D date. And in the measure grid below the F sales table, I've already calculated the first measure, total sales. Now I want to go back over and start our pivot table from the data model. So I click in R3. And I can use the standard pivot table button or the standard keyboard for pivot table, Alt-N-V. Notice it knows that we have something in the data model. So it'll base it on the data model. R3 is fine. Click OK. From D date, I'm going to drag year down to rows, months down to rows. There we get our years and months. From F sales, there's that F of X icon that means this is a measure. I'm going to drag it down to values. That part is looking fine all the way down. Now, our first calculation is going to be to please get the previous period's total amount. That way we can compare the two to calculate the change and then the percentage change. Now, the way DAX formulas work is right here, that total sales formula sees May 2015. So in the date table, it only sees the days in May 2015. And the date table is filtered down just to those days. That filter flows across the relationship and filters the sales table down to just those days. Well, if we're going to have a formula that will calculate the amount for the previous May, we're going to have the formula look at the current criteria or filter context and then jump back a year. Well, first, the formula we use in DAX to alter the filter context is calculate. And then we use same period last year, because same period last year, we'll look at May and jump back to the same period last year. So let's go over to the data model. And below total sales, I'm going to click in the measure grid, click up in the formula bar, and type sales last year. We're in Excel Power Pivot, not Power BI Desktop, so we have to type a colon and then an equal sign. By the way, these formulas that we're going to see work in either Power Pivot or Power BI Desktop. Now I type the letter C. I see calculate, so I hit tab. The expression, that's the formula we would like to use and then change the filter context. Square bracket. The only measure I have so far is total sales, so I see it in my dropdown. Tab. Remember, measures are always shown just with square brackets. And then later when we use columns, we have to use the table and the square brackets, comma. Now here's the filter. Calculate, we'll see, for example, May 2015. That will flow in here, and then we can change it by using SAM tab. Now we need to enter the date column from the date table, so DD, down arrow to date and tab. Now we have what we want. Same period last year, we'll see the date period flow in, and it will provide a valid list of dates for last year's period to calculate. And then calculate, we'll calculate total sales. Close parentheses and enter. Let's add some number formatting. Alt-Tab. Now we can drag sales last year down to values. And that's looking good. Each month calculation is going to work for sure. We'll have trouble when we get to the total, but not here because it's looking to the previous year, and that's all there is. It's actually for this formula, down for 2016 total. That's not what we want. We do not want all 12 months from the previous year. We only want from the previous year, January through July. Not only that, but we do not want any of these to show up. So we're going to go and change our formula. Now, the way we're going to change our formula is for each cell as we copy down, we're actually going to use SUMX, and we're going to ask SUMX to iterate over a list of months. Now, for any month cell, all SUMX will see is 1 month. But when we get down to the total, SUMX, because it's 2017, we'll see all of the months, January to December. And we'll ask the question, how many of those months actually have total sales? So it will only pick out these, in essence, getting a false for all of these and for all of these. So we're going to go back over to the data model, Alt-Tab, last year sales. We want to change this formula. Now, this is the formula we're actually going to run inside of SUMX. This will be the expression. But SUMX needs a table to iterate over. So I'm going to type SUMX. And the table we're going to give it is values. Now, values, if we give it down arrow to D date for month, close parentheses, comma. Right here, table. Every cell in the pivot table, values will deliver a unique list of items. So when it's in a month, an individual month, there'll be just that month. When it gets to the year, it'll have all the months for that particular year. Now, when we get down to the grand total, we will have a problem because it'll give us too many months. And same period last year will not work with that. But let's just see if we can try the rest of this. Remember, that's going to give us months for every cell in the pivot table. And we want to ask the question with the if function. Please look at down arrow total sales. And for every month in this table, ask the question, are you greater than 0? If you are, then I'm going to type a comma, then please run this formula. Now with if in DAX, we do not have to put the third argument. If it's false, it'll insert a blank. And that's what we want. So now I'm going to come to the end and close off if. And that's the expression, this whole if. Now remember that if, including calculate, runs over the months that values is delivering for each cell. Now I'm going to close parentheses. And if I hit enter and go back over here, it's going to give me an error because same period last year is not going to work in the grand total because of this contiguous date error. So we're going to go and alter it and simply ask, as the formula is copying down, is there just one value for the year? When it gets to a total cell, yes, there's just one value. When it gets to a month, yes, there's just one year value. But when it gets down to grand total, there'll be lots of years. So Alt-Tab. So up in the formula bar, right before SUMX, I'm going to use the if function and H down arrow to has one value. And we want to ask the question of down arrow the D date year column, close parentheses, comma. So as we copy down, every cell will ask the question, is there just a single year? When it comes out true, we'll run this formula. I come to the end, I click, and result if false, I want to leave that out so it shows a blank. Close parentheses and enter. Alt-Tab, and there our formula is working. Up here, we want to have empty cells because we have total sales. But down here, the formula is working for each month, for the prior year here because there's partial from the prior. Total year, we want all 12. But right here, check that out. It did not add all 12 months. If we come off to the side, Alt equals, and highlight January to July, enter, there's our correct total. So delete that. Now we want to take a little break right here and think about how this formula calculates in every single cell. SUMX is a function that iterates some formula over a table. Now let's just look at our result here. In that cell right there, the actual values function sees the pivot table filter context or criteria, May 2015. So values delivers a one-element table that says May 2015. That means that SUMX as a table has a single element. That if formula is run just on that one row. Because May 2015, if we look over here, total sales in the current filter context is greater than 0. This comes out true. That means the formula is allowed to run on this one element table. So really calculate total sales. Same period, we'll see May 2015. Same period last year, we'll convert it to May 2014. And that will consist of a valid list of dates in May 2014. That's all the individual days. And that's what calculate will use to calculate total sales. So total sales for last May is that number there, which is delivered back to the pivot table. Now, the same formula down here, it is in the context of all of the year 2017. So what happens? Values delivers a 12-element table. Inside of SUMX are all of these months. So SUMX runs or iterates that formula over all 12 rows in the table. This is the formula that it runs in every single row. The logical test, of course, comes out true up through July, false the rest of the time. That's the formula that gets run. That's the formula in the result if true argument of if. So as a result, since same period last year looks to the last year, boom, we get each one of the total sales for the months last year and zeros for all of the months where we had no total sales in the current year. Those numbers right there are actually added in step 3. SUMX sees all of these numbers and then adds them to get. Step 4 is SUMX adding and getting that total amount and boom, delivering it to the cell in the pivot table. That's a pretty amazing formula that's going to calculate the correct amount we want, sales for last year, for each cell in the pivot table. That formula is pretty amazing. Now let's go back to the regular scheduled program. Our sales last year is working. But if we're going to compare last year and this year to get change, we have to fix the total sales number. Because right here, although we want this to show in our report, internally the change formula cannot have the total amount for this year because we only want to compare May to December. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to take the actual measure, total sales, run it in SUMX over the same values of month. But now we're going to ask the question, for the 2015 total, I'm going to say, how many of the 12 months you see here have a sales last year that is greater than 0? And that's how we'll pick out just these amounts. Alt-Tab. I'm going to do a formula below sales last year. Click up in the formula bar. Comparison total sales, colon, equal sign, SUMX, values, DD, down arrow to month, close parentheses, comma. And the expression will be if, square bracket to get our measure, last year's sales are greater than 0. So for any given cell, if it's a single month, it'll either come out true or false, right? But if it's in the year, it'll go through all 12 months because it's the date table, but only when it sees sales for last year, comma, do we want SUMX to add total sales. Now, I don't want result if false, so I close parentheses on the if. There's our expression, the if, close parentheses on SUMX, and enter. Now we can go add some formatting, Alt-Tab. And although we don't want this in our report, we might as well drag it down and take a look. And sure enough, look at that. It's not the total for this current year for all 12 months, but just May to December. I can even look down in the status bar, and sure enough, that's the correct amount. And when I scroll down, of course, this one will work because we only have January to July here. Now we can subtract these two and calculate percentage change. Alt-Tab, click below, click up in the formula bar. Change, colon, equal sign, square bracket. Comparison total sales, that's the current amount, minus square bracket, sales last year. Enter. We'll add some number formatting. Alt-Tab, this will be our change formula. I drag it down. And look at that. It's correct for each one of the months. And just as we calculated over here correctly, the difference is showing up all the way down, including down here 1,553 as we calculated with formulas based on the show values as standard pivot table. Now we can do our percentage change, Alt-Tab, click below, up in the formula bar. Percentage change, colon, equal sign. And I'm going to use the divide function. The divide is great because you can give it numerator and denominator. And if there's an error, if we leave it blank, just like the if function, it will show blank. Numerator is square bracket. And there it is, change, tab, comma. And the denominator, square bracket, and we're comparing the change to the previous period, so sales last year, tab, close parentheses, enter. I'm going to add percentage number formatting. Alt-Tab. Now we can drag percentage change down to values. And look at that. And there's our percentage change all the way down. Now we can come over and uncheck comparison total sales. And there's our report. Now what we want to do is drag some new data before May 2014 and after July. Now I have new data over here. Highlight, Control-Shift, down arrow, Control-C. Come over to Tables, Control-Home, Control down arrow. And right below, I'm going to Control-V. Come back and get new data, Control-Home. Highlight, Control-Shift, down arrow, Control-C. Control down arrow, Control-V, Control up arrow, Control up arrow. And in Design, I'm going to go to Resize Table. Highlight the column headers, Control-Shift, down arrow, Control-Shift, down arrow. I don't know why it didn't pick it up. I must have that turned off or something. Click OK. Control-Home. And up in Data, we can refresh all or Control-Alt-F5. And sure enough, look at that. Now we have March and April up here. And our change, sales last year, and percentage change are all working. Now, these formulas were hard-coded in. But I could definitely update them just to double check. This year. And there we go. The amounts are looking the same. Wow, so that was how to create a DAX formula that showed us sales last year, change, and percentage change when we have incomplete sales data for either years in the past or the current year. And if we go back over here, we got to see, well, the sum function, of course. If HASONEVALUE, SUMX values, calculate same period last year, a bunch of DAX functions. Here we saw SUMX values and if, our straight subtraction, and then divide. All right, that was a lot of fun with DAX for calculating percentage change, month over month, and year over year formulas for incomplete years. We'll see you next video.